buenos dias. William Cabrera, Lincoln Commercial Group. Here with my CRM specialist, Daniel Vasquez, a.k.a. Danny V.
Pleasure having me on.
Thank you for being here, Danny. I appreciate you spending the time. Thank you very much. Hopefully we can put on a good show and give some good influence to other people your age that are interested in getting into commercial real estate.
Absolutely.
So what do you do? You're a student, right?
Yes, sir. I'm currently a student at FIU. I'm doing a double major in finance and international business and working here at Lincoln Commercial Group.
FIU, Florida International University. You know, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you know all about it.
I graduated twice, man. Bachelor's in Business Administration, Master's in Business Administration. It was my 6th university.
Oh, shit.
It's your 2nd one, right?
Yes. Transferred from Broward College, actually, yeah.
You've had the same major since you started?
No, I actually started in computer science, and then I kind of realized, computer science really wasn't for me. I enjoyed the world of business much more and understanding how businesses worked and through their numbers, and I decided to switch my majors, and I'm doing finance now.
Okay. So how long ago did you switch to the finance major?
Yeah, I did that in my sophomore year after I was in calculus 2. I was seeing all this stuff. I enjoy math, but not that type of math. I like seeing real different style of math and how it's incorporated into the business. And I decided, this is not for me, and I just switched majors.
Okay. Man, you say calculus, and it gives me goosebumps, man. business calculus kind of kicked my ass, man. I failed it the first 3 times, but I'm about perseverance, and persistence breaks down resistance. So I passed it on my 4th try with a C.
Oh,
That's it. But man, lesson to give everybody else who's going to be in finance or a math major or anything with numbers. Don't cheat in algebra. Do not cheat in algebra. I cheated in pre-algebra in high school, algebra, and every other, math that I could think of.
Yeah.
And it was not helpful when I got to college, man. I didn't know any of the basic rules, and it was very, very difficult. So Don't cheat, man. Do yourself a favor. Just go through the work. Learn the steps. That way, when you get to the higher level of education, you can get through it much more fluidly.
At the end of the day, it's all about fundamentals. Math gets built on top of each other. So I could see why something like that may come to bite you later.
So I understand you've taken the entrepreneur path before, right?
Yeah, I used to own a pressure washing business with my buddy. We first started off right after COVID. I graduated high school, and I was like, man, I just want to go start my own business. I learned a lot. I saw a lot of different the difficulties that go within it and the grind that comes with being an entrepreneur. And I saw, I really enjoyed it. I was able to build something for myself. I was able to deliver a product. I was able to put, a smile on people's faces through what I did. And I got a lot of fulfillment from it. But, it came a point where I no longer really wanted to do that. I wanted to pursue a different path. And, I applied here, and I came across William and Lincoln Commercial Group. I'm currently learning a lot about real estate and the intricacies that go behind it and the financing and how these deals are structured. And one of the biggest things I learned about having my own business was the ability to have a mentor. One of my biggest regrets was not going to work for someone else when I had first started out, because I would have scaled up my progress within my business much quicker at a faster rate, and I would have learned while being paid. And the ability to have the proper mentor who's going to guide you in the right direction in business is crucial to me. And I've been able to realize that through my last business.
That's good to hear, man. So what were you and your partner pressure washing, man? I'm hoping it wasn't each other.
No, man, no. You'll get a nasty cut. I've gotten some cuts before. Yeah.
So have I, man. I have a couple scars on my shins.
Fortunately, I've only had one incident, but yeah, we specialized in roofs. Roofs were really where it's at. Like the money was at. You're able to maintain a high profit at, very low cost. You only the cost of material and the labor that goes into it. And we did roofs, we did sidewalks, housing, like the sides of houses and stuff. So it was a good adventure. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good, man. So how'd you come across Lincoln Commercial Group?
Yeah, so I came across Lincoln Commercial Group on Handshake. It's a job board, basically, no different than in
through the universities.
Yeah, through the universities, exactly.
So we all know I'm a big fan of education.
Yep.
So
yeah, I applied. Okay. I met William. We hit it off the first time. I stayed here for like 4 hours the first time I met him.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I think it was like 5 hours.
Yeah, I stayed here for a while my first time, yeah.
Okay, but what was it about had you thought about commercial real estate before you came across that job posting?
Yeah, I've thought about real estate, and I saw the importance behind it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the biggest industries in the United States. But I had never really been involved with real estate, you know. I had never really worked in real estate at all. You know, I came across it. I came across the website, and there was some things that had caught my eye, like the 1031 exchange, which is just a tax deferment strategy, basically. You defer your taxes, and you're able to reposition your capital. And that was one thing that caught my eye because I saw there was a lot of tax benefits within real estate that, you know, maybe other investment vehicles may not provide you with.
Sure. You mentioned mentorship.
Yeah.
Any feedback you can give me on the mentorship that I've been offering you so far for the last, how long you been here? 5 months now?
Yeah. Well, William has been able to honestly change the way I've thought of things, not just in terms of real estate, but business. He's been able to show me how a team is built. At the end of the day, you know, a great organization isn't built by one person. It's built by several people. It takes a team of people to do things in general. And I've been able to see the progression of how things are done. You know, it's not done overnight. You need to find the proper guy for the right thing and be able to put him in a position where he's going to succeed, not only for you, but the organization as a whole. You know.
And for himself or herself.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Personal development as well as professional development.
Yeah.
Very important. Very important. What specific knowledge are you still hoping to gain from me as your mentor?
Yeah. So some of the things that I've seen within real estate is the financing. A big part of it is being able to put down that 20% into a building and get your hands onto it. So, I mean, I'm sure there's creative ways of financing, but I would like to learn more about the financing that goes within these deals.
Okay. Anything specific you want to ask me right now?
I remember you spoke about cross-collateralization.
Cross-collateralization.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, where you collateralize another building with a building you plan on acquiring.
Okay. Yeah, I can give you a deal story on that. So I came across a building owner who had a 54-unit building. This was 2018, I believe, 2019. It was before the pandemic prices. 54 units. He wanted $8 million for this deal. It was, you know, a good deal. It was a nice deal. It wasn't, you know, below market. It was at about market value, but it was just a nice property, great location, with, you know, great way to preserve capital and increase wealth by holding that property. So anyway, I have a book of business, and the first ones that I was reaching out to, I reached out to maybe 4 or 5 potential investors for this deal. I'll try to cut the long story down and focus on one particular buyer. I knew he had a 45-unit building, maybe about 4 or 5 blocks away from this one, worth roughly about the same amount, about $8 million. So I call him and I pitch him this deal, the 54 units, and I tell him, look, you can buy this building without coming out of pocket any cash, nothing. But what do you mean, William? What do you mean, William? How's that going to work? It's like, well, your building is $8 million and you want it free and clear. There's no debt on it. This building over here is $8 million. So all you need to do is put up your other one as collateral to the bank and do a blanket mortgage with the second one. So essentially it's one mortgage with 2 properties under it.
So you're combining both of these mortgages.
Correct. So there would be an $8 million mortgage, but there'd be 2 properties. Each one of them is worth $8 million. So there's a $16 million equity holding, right? Or an $18 million investment with only $8 million in a mortgage. So he's putting up his property as collateral. So you're cross-collateralizing.
The power of leverage.
That's great. Yeah. It's great. And this guy in particular walked out of closing with $256,000 cash.
Wow.
Not very many people come into a closing and walk out with cash. Okay. But he did. So needless to say, he answers my call whenever I call him.
Yeah, I can't blame him. What about seller financing? I've heard the word being thrown around, and I've heard what has been your past with seller financing?
Man, I sold a portfolio of 5 buildings for an elderly couple. They were in their 70s as well. Some people might get offended by the word elderly if they're in the 70s, but either way, they were, good people, good-hearted people, and they needed the cash flow. They had all their buildings paid for, and that's how they survived, from their cash flow. That's how they maintained their lifestyle. And the buildings were distressed because the husband wasn't in the greatest health. and the wife was the one running around like a chicken without a head, trying to manage the buildings and maintain the buildings, and it was a lot of work for them. It was a lot of work for them. So when they came to the realization that they needed out of the buildings, the whole management aspect, they didn't want to hire a management company, but they needed to figure out a way to maintain cash flow. So when I described the option to do seller financing, meaning they act like the bank,
Mm-hmm.
it rang a very loud bell for them. They're like, okay, we know these buildings. If somebody comes in and puts 30% down, they're putting a significant amount into the game, so they're more than likely not going to walk away from it. So it worked out for them very, very well. It ended up being a 10-year balloon with 30-year amortization. So they're getting principal payments broken down over 360 months, but the entire balance at the end of the 10th year is due.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, it was at a 6% interest rate.
And was that current interest rate at that time?
Roughly. It might have been a point higher, point and a half or so, give or take. Seller financing typically comes in a little bit higher because there's certain benefits to the buyer. It doesn't show up on their credit report. They're not really scrutinized as much as a lender would.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an easier transaction all around.
For the buyer.
For the buyer and the seller, but mostly for the buyer. Mostly for the buyer. When you go get conventional financing on a multi-tenant income producing property, the weight is put on the property itself, right, from the bank. The bank is looking at the property and making sure that this property's income can sustain the debt that is being underwritten, right? But they also look at the borrower. So they look at it as at a macro perspective to make sure the borrower is somebody responsible.
So they may take a look at his personal assets, whatever he may own in his
Their
house.
schedule of real estate owned. They're going to take a look at the schedule of real estate owned, meaning how many properties they own, what they are, what their worth is, and what his current debt is on those properties. See if he's over leveraged or not, right? Credit score. But the biggest factor is the building's ability to repay the mortgage, which would be the debt service.
And I've often seen investors get into something called a value play, which can be done in many ways.
How often have you seen this?
Oh, well, I've heard of it, better said. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard of it, better said, value play. I've heard the word get thrown around a lot.
Value add.
Yeah, value add, there you go.
A value add opportunity, sure. This is typically when the building's rents are well below market, and the value of a building is a function of its income. So if they're buying a building, just to make numbers round, if they're buying a building for $1 million and they're buying it at a 10% return, they're getting $100,000, right? At a 10 cap.
Mm-hmm.
But they know that in 6 to 12 months, they can turn that tenancy into a $200,000 annual net operating income. If they go resell it at the same 10 cap that they bought it for, now they can get $2 million for that same building they just paid $1 million for. How much improvements are they going to have to make to that building? It's tough to, there's many different scenarios to look at it. But, if it's, it might not require any.
Yeah.
I remember I got into a fourplex once. I bought the fourplex for $400,000, and it was a 2003 construction. I bought it in I don't even remember, 2019, I think. 2003 construction, 2019. I bought it from the original owners. They actually lived in one of the units for a while at first when they first had it built. And all I had to do was turn the tenants, because the tenants for the 2s, they were paying $800 a month when they should have been paying like $1,300 a month. And the 1s were paying like $5,000 and $6,000.
So you just brought it to market value.
Right. So the tenants, obviously, they got pretty upset when I mentioned to them that, the rents were coming up to market. But I also offered to help them relocate to somewhere else that could be more feasible for them. So I did what I could to try to help. But, that's the whole business plan. I was trying to realize that value that I knew I could add just by increasing rents. So going back to what I was saying, this property didn't need any rehab. Just ripped out the carpets because it had tile on the wet areas like the kitchen and bathrooms, and then carpet everywhere else. So I ripped out the carpets and I put laminate flooring. I painted the outside. I replaced the exterior doors, with material and labor that might have been, $500 a door total, and that's high. So, $2,000 for 4 units. I had the roof pressure washed. and that was about it, man. I might have, into that fourplex, I might have put total, I don't know, 15, 20 grand, give or take. I bought it for 400. I held it for a little bit over a year and I sold it for 725.
Nice.
All because I saw it as a value add opportunity and I was able to recognize the value within the building.
Yeah, because I've heard you say it, but the price of these buildings is deduced from the income they produce.
Yeah, the value of a building is a function of its income.
Exactly.
But now, at the same income that I bought it, had somebody tried to sell it to me at the $725,000 price that I sold it for, there's no value add there.
Yeah, you're just buying the
They're
asset.
charging you for the work you still need to get done in order to get it to be that price.
Yeah.
So it would have been completely, I would have been overpaying significantly.
What it's really worth at the end of the day.
Well, it wasn't really worth that because the income wasn't there to support it.
And how would these banks typically view these value adds? Do they view it any different than a traditional property?
Sure. Oftentimes, a conventional lender won't lend it because they have very strict and tight lending requirements. So oftentimes, a conventional lender won't lend on it. Because if the income's too low, it won't support the minimum, or it won't meet the minimum debt service coverage ratio requirement, which is typically a 1.20. Meaning, after all the expenses and after paying the debt service, there needs to be at least 20% left over from the net operating income. So the net operating income needs to cover the debt service coverage, or the debt service rather, 100%, and plus another 20% left over from the NOI.
Yeah.
So that's 1.2.
Have a buffer between those two.
Right. So if it's not meeting that requirement, a conventional lender is most likely not going to lend on it without the buyer putting more money down. And the buyer doesn't necessarily want to put more money down. So instead, they go to a hard money lender. The hard money lender would have more lenient requirements to get into a deal like that because that's what they do. They just help bridge the gap between the purchase and then the conventional financing, which would be the long-term financing.
And typically, these would have a higher interest rate.
Correct. And either a point or two fee on the front end or a point or two on the back end at disposition. All right, so let's bring this back into focus, Danny. So we've established you're a 20-year-old college student.
Yes, sir.
And one of the previous podcasts that was hosted here at Lincoln Commercial Group with Jeff Brown from Supreme Motors USA, he mentioned that the advice he would give his younger version would be to start early. Start early. So you're 20 years old, you're just starting in commercial real estate now. What do you feel is the biggest value, biggest benefit for you?
I personally feel like I've been able to speed up almost my learning process. I've been able to see how people structure these deals. I've seen sometimes people put buildings in trusts. I've seen people put buildings in an LLC. I've seen holding LLCs. So I feel like I'm able to see what experienced real estate investors are able to do to scale up their real estate business.
What have you learned so far? Because you've been doing quite a bit of databasing, right? You've been doing a lot of property research, a lot of ownership research.
Yeah, absolutely.
What have you been learning?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very familiar with the South Florida market, at least specifically Broward. I've been able to see, the different styles of buildings that there are and, the income they produce and some of the prices people pay for these doors. Some people are willing to pay $250 a door. Some people are willing to pay $200 a door. It depends on, certain conditions of the building, maybe the area, or, going back to what we said, the income it produces.
So we talked at some point, man, a couple months back when you start making some bigger checks, right? When you start making some big deals, and you start having the option to place capital here and there, you told me something about buying a house, and I was like, no, don't you buy a house.
Yeah.
Right? What are you gonna do? What's the plan that I'm gonna help you
my plan is
on?
to get a fourplex and ideally rent it out to 3 other people and have my own place.
Do you remember why a fourplex?
Well, I'm able to have other tenants that pay for my debt.
Well, not just that, but it still falls under residential lending guidelines, so it qualifies for FHA.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so you don't have to go the commercial lending route, which you have to put 20% down.
Yeah, and I
Here
remember
you can get in with 3.5%.
Yeah.
As long as you are going to be an owner occupant for at least 12 months.
Yeah, and I remember you also brought up that eventually, if I want to get out of the building, I can do a 1031 exchange and to get.
Or you keep it for more cash flow, right?
Yeah.
Depends how long you live in there.
Yeah.
Because if you're buying it for $1 million, let's say, and in today's market, $250 a door for a fourplex, we can find that. We can find that. Going FHA, 3.5% down, and then you're probably going to have like 1.5 in closing costs, give or take. So 5% altogether to get into a fourplex, $50,000. You can do that being in the commercial real estate industry.
Yeah, very lucrative industry to be in.
It is. So this kind of goes out to, everybody else your age looking to get started in commercial real estate. That could be a really good plan to not only start in the industry, but really start accumulating wealth, preserving capital, and increasing your wealth through the ownership and exchange of multi-tenant income-producing properties. Right? You move into this building, you bought it for $1 million, but you only paid $50,000, and the other 3 tenants are going to help offset all the holding costs. They're going to cover the property taxes. It's going to cover the property insurance. It's going to cover the maintenance. Any repairs will most likely be covered out of that too.
Yeah.
And then additional income is additional income for you, right? So all the building expenses should be covered just from those 3 tenants. And then you make another big check. All of a sudden you have now another $50,000, another $100,000. Yeah. Now you can put that down on another fourplex.
Yeah.
Right? After you've lived in this one for a year, you keep this one, you can go do FHA again.
And rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you've accumulated 3, 4, 5, 6 of these fourplexes.
And
you're only, 3, 4 years into the business.
Yeah, and then potentially sell them as a portfolio.
You could potentially sell them as a portfolio, do a 1031 exchange, defer your capital gains taxes, reposition that into one roof, maybe with 10, 12, 20 doors. And now you're really in the chips at that point.
Yeah,
and you're only 20, so you can achieve that before you're 30 for sure. You just got to go back to what we mentioned. You make the decision. Also mentioned on the previous podcast. You go through the door and you stick to it. You make the decision. You stay focused. You stay determined. You don't try to open the other side doors to see what's there. You just keep going forward, executing on that strategy.
Yeah, like you say, specialization, focusing on one thing and become very, very familiar with it.
Specialization is key. Specialization is key. So I want to do everything I can to help you achieve those goals. Execute on the strategy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I also want to help you, execute your dream for this brokerage and being able to scale it up to the levels.
Thank you, man. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Absolutely, man.
So everybody out there who wants to get started in commercial real estate, 20 years old, 21 years old, 18 years old. You only need to be 18 to get your real estate license in the state of Florida. Please visit lincolncommercialgroup.com. You'll learn more about the mentorship program in detail. Feel free to send me an email. Look forward to hearing from you. Danny V, thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much for the attention.
You as well.
I appreciate you being here, man. I'm very glad that I got a chance to meet you, and I'm very glad that I have you on my team.
Likewise, man.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Preserving Capital and Increasing Wealth. Please visit our website, lincolncommercialgroup.com. Please follow us on all social media platforms. This is your host, William Cabrera, saying goodbye. God bless. Have a great night. Enjoy the rest of your day. All the best wishes in the world.